Welcome to today's episode, where we unravel a tale that's been passed down through generations, a story that still stirs fear and fascination among those who hear it. Today, we explore the real story of Ngouya the witch. Ngouya's name has been whispered through the centuries, carrying with it a weight of superstition, power, and mystery. But behind the myths, behind the fear, there's a deeper story, one of a woman who may have been more than just a figure of dark magic. Who was Ngouya really? Was she a powerful sorceress? A misunderstood healer? Or perhaps a rebel who stood against the conventions of her time? Every legend has its beginning, and Ngouya's tale is no different. Set in the heart of what is now Central Africa, Ngouya lived during a time when nature, the spirit world, and human lives were deeply intertwined. In villages that dotted the vast expanses of jungle and savanna, the people lived in constant reverence and fear of the forces that governed their world. In these communities, there were always those who were said to possess special powers: the healers, the shamans, and occasionally, the witches. Ngouya was born into a time when such people wielded tremendous influence. The story suggests that from a young age, Ngouya exhibited unusual gifts, an affinity with nature, an ability to heal the sick, and a knowledge of herbs that seemed beyond her years. It was said that she could command the winds and bring the rains during times of drought, which made her both revered and feared. But it wasn't these abilities that cast her as a witch. It was something far more sinister in the eyes of her people. At first, Ngouya's gifts were seen as blessings. She was a healer, a woman who brought health and prosperity to the village. Her remedies were sought after, her wisdom was valued, and many saw her as a connection between the world of the living and the spirit realm. But as is often the case with those who hold power, envy and suspicion began to grow. The turning point came when a series of unexplained deaths began to occur in the village. Crops failed, the rains became unpredictable, and disease spread. The villagers, desperate for answers, sought out their traditional leaders and priests, who pointed their fingers at Ngouya. They accused her of witchcraft, of cursing the village, and of using dark powers to wreak havoc. The very gifts that once elevated her were now the cause of her downfall. The label of witch was not just a title in those days, it was a sentence. It meant exile, persecution, and, in many cases, death. Ngouya became an outcast, driven into the forests, but this was not the end of her story. In fact, it was just the beginning of the legend. Section 3. The birth of the legend. Ngouya disappeared into the wilderness, but the stories of her actions grew. It was said that in her exile, she had fully embraced the dark forces that once whispered in the winds. The villagers spoke of strange occurrences in the forest, animals behaving unnaturally, sudden storms appearing and disappearing, and eerie lights glowing in the night. Some who ventured too deep into the forest claimed to have seen Ngouya herself, now transformed into something more than human. She had, they said, become one with the spirit world, drawing power from the land, the air, and the creatures that live within. The legend claimed she could take the form of an animal, a shadow, or even the very wind itself. But not all the stories painted her as a villain. There were those who believed that Ngouya had never been a witch at all, that she had been wronged by her people, and that her actions were simply those of a woman defending herself against injustice. Some said she had protected the forest from invaders, that she had kept the balance between nature and humankind, and that her magic was nothing more than the deep understanding of the natural world. As Ngouya's legend spread, her story became darker, more twisted. She was no longer just a healer or a misunderstood woman. She was a witch who could summon the spirits of the dead, who commanded legions of animals to do her bidding. Some said she had sold her soul to dark spirits in exchange for eternal life, and that she lived deep in the heart of the jungle, forever young, forever powerful. According to these myths, Ngouya would lure travelers into her lair, where she would steal their souls, trapping them in the forest to wander aimlessly for eternity. These stories were passed from village to village, from generation to generation, each telling growing more frightening than the last. But was there truth to these darker tales? Was Ngouya truly a witch with such malevolent powers, or were these stories simply the result of fear, misunderstandings, and the need for an explanation for the unknown? In many African societies, women who held power, who defied traditional roles, were often branded as witches. Was Ngouya a victim of this, or had she truly embraced the darkness she was accused of wielding? To this day, the name Ngouya is still spoken in whispers across Central Africa. In some places, she is remembered as a guardian of the forest, a symbol of strength and independence in the face of oppression. In others, she is seen as a warning, a figure who strayed too close to the dark forces of nature and was consumed by them. But perhaps the real story of Ngouya lies somewhere in between. Maybe she was neither saint nor villain, but simply a woman who lived in a world that feared what it didn't understand. The truth of her story, like so many legends, may never be fully known. But one thing is certain: Ngouya's tale has left an indelible mark on the culture and history of the region. In modern times, some view her story as a symbol of female power and resilience, a reminder that women like Ngouya, who challenge norms and possess great knowledge, should be celebrated rather than feared. Others still cling to the darker side of her legend, a cautionary tale about the dangers of dabbling in forces beyond our control.